Budge, go for landing. 1,000 feet. 900.
Looks like at that point they're finally getting to see a shadow of their own lunar module.
Yes, it's a small dot.
700. 47.
Probably wasn't visible on the TV. I mean, you know, from
500. 9%.
watching it on television.
400. Minus 15. T66. Okay. Minus 15.
Also, I think the camera was pointed in the wrong direction to catch that.
250. Minus 14. 200. 150. Minus 7.
Oh, come on, not again.
120 feet. Minus 5. Yeah, got some rust. 1% view. 100 feet. Minus 5. 80. 60 at 3. 50 at 3. 42. 6% fuel. 32. 25. 22. 15. 2.
Hey. Everyone's landed apart from Gassador. There he goes.
I hope you all managed to all touch down in your mass descent successfully.
Nice.
50 years ago.
Yeah, I even did it with external camera.
Apollo 15 did
Yeah, same.
Hadley Plate, the space between Mount Hadley, one of the highest mountains on the moon, and Hadley Run, an old collapsed lava tube. Obviously, it hadn't been lava there for millions of years.
Something was coming. Some sound.
One of the most amazing things a human being has ever set sight upon within the solar system. Obviously, this sort of grandeur is something that sets Apollo 15 above and beyond pretty much everything else in the Apollo program, which is saying a lot. So they were all very interesting in their own particular way. Even Apollo 11, obviously, them getting down was the main thing. In Apollo 15's case, this was like going to the absolute maximum of pushing the lunar module. As you saw in the simulation, they were flying directly over the Apennine mountain range. They were skimming across the top of the mountains as they did that. At one point, 2 mountain peaks were higher than the lunar module itself as they skimmed another mountain on the descent. None of the
That's
other
what I was
missions were
noticing.
that dangerous.
Bloody hell.
That brilliant. Dave Scott was the most amazing pilot who's ever lived because of this. Now, if you think about it, it seems quite a good feat of piloting, but if you break it down, it is genuinely amazing. We are talking about flying through a vacuum in a spacecraft that has almost no strength whatsoever. I mean, it has basically the tensile strength of a Coke can, maybe less than a Coke can. Because for example, during the manufacture of Apollo lunar modules, was once someone actually dropped a heavy wrench, and it went straight through the floor.
Oof.
That is how deliberately thin this was made to save weight, so they could actually get it to the moon.
That's crazy.
Obviously,
Paper
designed to
thin.
operate in a vacuum, but that's why it was
In
successful.
point of
Now,
Yeah.
to do that,
Jesus.
flying something less strength than a Coke can across a mountain range at low level, that takes some guts. It takes a lot of skill.
The-
a lot of
the lunar module actually cannot stand up under its own weight in Earth gravity.
Still,
Any display you've ever seen, it's been modified.
They did take part in
That's crazy.
something unique actually to them, what's called a stand-up EVA, which you actually just pop your head out of the docking port and have a look around, take some pictures. It's like being on holiday, really, except your holiday's the moon. Quite amazing, really. A place of outstanding beauty. But I say this is why we've come to this place at the end of this expedition. This waypoint 8 is called in EDSM and the Galactic Mapping Project David and Goliath, named after the huge mountain ranges that you see before you. The idea obviously was to sort of, make some kind of comparison, or at least a sort of metaphorical kind of link between like the rills here and canyons next to the sort of sweeping mountains. And so doff our hats and our own little tribute to these very, very brave and very sort of skilled men, you know, who did this half a century ago, which seems insane because like, you look at their spacesuits, the spacecraft itself. Okay, it's not hyper modern, but it still sort of seems more sophisticated than the late 60s, early 1970s could possibly provide. I mean, the commander of Apollo 17, Gene Cernan, a very famous man in his own right, the last man on the moon, declared that the Apollo program was like a small piece of the 21st century pulled into the mid-20th century. And I think he was completely right. In many ways, Cernan was the opposite of Neil Armstrong. He wasn't the world's best pilot. He was good enough to do what he did. Armstrong was a much better pilot, but Armstrong was not as eloquent in describing the experience. People like Cernan and Dave Scott, the Apollo 15 mission commander, were some of the most eloquent people, I think, in describing the experience of going not just into space, but to another world. I think about only to date 12 people in the history of humanity have ever stood foot on another world. All of those being on the moon, and all of those being, within a 3-year period of time. It was a very short experience, really. But Apollo was, I think, a blessing to the human race, and hopefully something that we will do better in the very near future. But for its time, it was mind-blowingly good. And as we mentioned before, their rivals in the Soviet Union, things did amazing work as well. I mean, we did get to the point where they could orbit Soyuz spacecraft. Yeah, let's keep it together. Soyuz